Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is episode 5 of Riding Backwards podcast. I am Jason Klink, your host, and I have to make sure I enunciate riding backwards because when I do captions later on, it seems to want to put writing backwards, which I guess could be interesting by itself. But welcome back to the podcast in episode 5. A little different format here today. Trying out a new mic, new video, and hopefully creating a decent piece of content for you to watch. Anyways, today's episode, I wanted to talk about not only 10 years in the fire service, but 10 years in um, public safety. And meaning the length of time that you spend working or occupying space in these areas. So with that, what made me think about this is like, the 10 years in a career fire department, and I've worked both career and in volunteer firehouses, but the tenure in a career fire department or a tenure in another public safety agency like 911 is pretty finite. Typically in 911, especially in New York State, you work 30 years, you have to be 55 years old in order to max out a retirement benefit. That's a pretty long time to work that job, and I've always been of the opinion that it's too long, and that realistically these professionals should not be working, a 911 dispatch job past 55 years old, even though they're trying to get to that 30-year max benefit. You get to a point where your skills start suffering. You start getting very tired or even burned out. That's an awful long time, just my opinion. Fire, police typically are 20, 25-year retirement and you're done. You could get hired at 22 and effectively be retired at 42, 47 at the latest. A little bit different setup there. EMS, that tends to be up in the air when it comes to tenure. There's many EMS providers out there. Not only do they work a full-time job at one EMS agency, they could work part-time at several agencies just to make a decent living, which could eventually extend out a retirement depending on retirement planning and such. And the reason I bring this up is more on the volunteer side of things. And this is where I was had this thought on tenure, especially in the volunteer firehouse. Now, I've talked about before how I grew up in a volunteer firehouse. I was ultimately chief in that firehouse. But 10 years can be interrupted, 10 years can start and stop, or, there's very few individuals, especially one gentleman in my volunteer firehouse that has been there 70 plus years in different capacities. The reason I bring this up is I was in this volunteer firehouse for over 20 or 25 years. I had been fire chief. I got to a point where I just felt like I was in a rut and the wheels were spinning. And I decided to, at that time, I thought was going to be my retirement. Um, that being said, I had friends of mine, colleagues that I worked with at 911 that had recruited me to another department. I figured, hey, fresh start, maybe a breath of fresh air. We'll give it a shot. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it was, but my exhaustion with the industry still was present. So that didn't last all that long. And ultimately, I left there, went back to the home department, was there a little while. I ended up moving out of the area. I had a whole new life starting. And I ended up moving away from that department. And again, recruited, joined another department. I was there almost 3 years. Again, breath of fresh air, great department, a lot of positives there. But as my wife, my life started going down a different pathway with different business opportunities, it was time to leave the fire service altogether. And in 2017-18, I decided enough was enough. The retirement was going to stick, at least I thought at that time, and it was time to go down a different path. Always had a lot of passion and motivation for the fire service, a lot of passion and motivation for public safety. Why? And this is why I stayed in the industry on the private sector side, working for technology companies that ultimately would help support my colleagues that were still working in public safety. And I was good with that decision. Fast forward to the end of 2023. Actually, fast forward to probably the beginning of 2022, when a couple of friends ended up becoming chief officers in the old home volunteer firehouse, and they asked for my input on some things, some opinions, and some advice. And the thought crossed my mind of re-engaging and giving it a try again, to the point where I actually had completed a request to return from retired to active. And then things got in the way. I started, timing was not right, that kind of situation. And I pulled back from that decision to go from retired to active again. Now, fast forward to the end of 2023, and a very good friend of mine, a brother in the firehouse, assumed the role of fire chief, and again asked for my advice and my direction and my input on some very serious concerns that he had with the direction of the department. Realistically, like many volunteer firehouses, they struggle to get staffing, struggle to answer calls, and struggle to have people in the firehouse. And the participation level is an all-time low. A lot of leadership decisions that were made up to this point created a negative vacuum that wasn't getting any better. And I had said to my friend, my brother, the fire chief, or the potential new fire chief, was, you got to start changing. You have to change something, because if you can keep spinning your wheel and things and expect results, that's what insanity. So he took that hard this year. Allowing veteran members to pass without being gone a long enough time. Current rules and regulations state that they had to be a firefighter all over again. Didn't matter if they had 15 or 20 years of service, they essentially had to start all over again for a year. That deterred a lot of the veteran firefighters from doing that. Another part of it was giving members the opportunity standby time in the firehouse. Instead of running out the door, in and out of the door of the house, it allows them to tragic event had to bring everybody together. And usually, unfortunately, in public safety, that happens. But man, the brotherhood and sisterhood during this time was probably nothing like I've experienced before. And I've been through line of duty deaths in certain situations, but something was very different, probably because it was very personal for me. And as I experienced this, the draw to service started to increase, to the point in July of this year, I decided to give it another try and return to the active ranks from being retired to be one of those standby members that pulled shift in the firehouse to help and be of service to the community. I've served for over 30 years. And with that was a draw to more leadership potential. And as this year drew to a close, my tenure has started all over again in the firehouse. Not really sure how long it's going to last, but we'll take it day by day, week by week, month by month, and definitely year to year. But the fire chief made some changes and wanted to bring some, um, veteran fire chiefs, some experienced fire chiefs back into the leadership ranks. One of them being me, and so we're gonna give it a try one more time. Some folks in the service call it recycling, repurposing, losing our minds because we've done this once already. But I joke tongue in cheek that becoming an assistant chief again going into 2025. Hopefully, I'm in the second assistant chief role longer than an hour because I did this 21 years ago. And because of a disruption in the election process and the popularity contests that go on in the volunteer firehouses, the first time I was second assistant chief, I was there for an hour. And then by the beginning of the year, because of the way the policies were and disruptions, I went from second assistant chief to first, and spent the year of 2004 as first assistant chief before assuming the roles of fire chief in 2005 and 6. And that's a whole nother story, whole nother pathway that I want to get into. But my long-winded point here today was 10 years in the career side of firehouses and public safety are much different than 10 years in the volunteer firehouses. The work's all the same. The leadership qualities should all be the same. But it's a different time, different beast, and a lot of things need to be changed for volunteer firehouses to survive in 2025 and beyond. So I just wanted to share that story today, talk about 10 years in the firehouse, bit of a ramble, bit of a rant, but something I've been thinking about since my tenure in the firehouse has taken a much unanticipated turn here over the last 6 months. So with that, I'd love to hear your comments, like, comment, share, drop your comments below. Let me hear your experiences and your tenure in public safety in a career firehouse or volunteer firehouse. And share this with everyone because it's the only way we're going to build a community around this little podcast. So with that, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a great day.